This is Jackets Debrief, a show about the Columbus Blue Jackets, the National Hockey League, and part of the Hockey Podcast Network. Hey everyone, welcome back to Jackets Debrief. It has been a while since I've been with you. That is all on me. It is in the summer. I'm going to be honest, guys. Once we got into the playoffs this year, things just didn't stick with me like they have other years. Now, maybe it's the fact the Jackets weren't in it, so they couldn't make any kind of run. They couldn't do anything. It was rough. So that's where we're at currently here with it. But hey, we're back. The plan is, again, for shows to pick back up weekly here at this point and to start going that way for a while now as we go through the rest of the off season. Maybe another break sometime in August, depending on how things are going. But right now, we are getting into the hot and heavy of it. Things are going nuts. We are heading up for the expansion draft. The whole league feels like it's crazy. But you know what else is crazy? You know what action is crazy that you could be in? That's right, our friends at DraftKings. That's right. With DraftKings, there's all sorts of games right now. Now, we're in the NBA Finals. I think they're almost out. We're getting close to the end of that. Hockey season's over. But you know what there are? There's golf tournaments. There's racing. There's MMA. There's baseball. There's everything else you want to play games with. So go on the DraftKings. Download the DraftKings app now. Go there. Use promo code THPN for your free shot at tons of money, tons of free prizes. It's awesome. Definitely do that. So get involved, get looking at DraftKings. It's going to be a good time for you. You'll enjoy it. Download their app. Use the promo code THPN. All right, guys. So starting off with the beer of the week. This is one that my wife the other day made a trip down to Cincinnati. I think it's called Trader Joe's. They got a bunch of strange different stuff from different countries, a lot of cool things like that. I'm going to be honest, I've been trying to find this beer online that she got me, and I'm having a hard time with it. Oh, there it is. Here it is. It is something else. It is I can't even pronounce this. It's T-O, and then the next O has one of those slash lines through it. L, Frostbite. Look at this thing, folks. Look at that. That is the most generic beer thing you've ever seen. Look at the cap on the top. It's just white with like a date on it. This is what happens. My wife was like, this beer looks boring and uninteresting. Makes me think of my husband. So here it is. I get to try this bad boy. It is apparently an American pale ale brewed with orange peel and pine needles that is so frosty that it needs to be stored cold and may bite if you touch it. This beer is all about the balance, not the base. Imagine the flavors of pine needles and orange peel. Now imagine the same flavors, only represented by Aurora, Citra, Tettnagar, Simcoe, and Amarillo hops. The hoppy dry mix of spices and hops makes the perfect winter American-style pale ale. Thus, I'm drinking it on July 18th, National Ice Cream Day in America. But that's what we do here, because I'm not smart. Oh, that's good. That is... I mean, there's a little bit of hop there in it. But when they talk about all those other spices in it, like it's not overwhelming, but you get these other flavors you can feel across the tongue. That is good, folks. Yes, go get one of those if you can find them. I'm going to enjoy this one a lot. This is great. All right. So, I have not had a show. There's not a good way to transition here, so we're just going to do it. I haven't had a show since the news about the death of goalie Matiss Kivlenieks. We're going to take a minute. We're going to talk about that before we get into expansion drafts and all that other stuff. And the thing is, I'm not going to sit. I mean, there's lots of good pieces out there reading about, people who remembered him and all that stuff. I'm not going to sit here and talk about it because I've never met the man. My strongest memory of him was that first win he had against the Rangers. Because I remember it being like, wow, that's his first game there in New York. And that game, Oliver Bjorkstrand gets 2 goals, and the Blue Jackets beat the Rangers 2-1, which was great. But it was when I saw the news, it was a bit of a gut punch kind of thing. I mean, it's one of those things that you just never expect. You never expect to see It's an awful thing. I mean, I'm sure at this point, most of you, if you haven't, be thankful for it. But I'm sure most of you, like me, you've had at least one situation in your life where someone has been gone before their time. And it's always rough and it's always hard. And you never, it's something that always kind of sticks with you. It's different. The last night at the crew game, they had a nice couple of moments. At the 80th minute, the Nordeca, the big fan section, went silent, and they just said, "Hold up your scarves for this 1 minute to honor Elvis Merce Lincoln's." Or not, Matiss Kivlenieks. I'm sorry, didn't little slip of the tongue there on it. I know that Elvis has been a big part of the story because he gave that very moving story at the memorial service for Matiss, where he talked about how essentially Matiss saved him and his essentially his family's life. It's tough. It's tough, guys. And the thing that came to my mind, especially after Elvis told that story, my first time at when I was in high school, I came home sometime in mid-May or so, and there was a voicemail for me on the voicemail machine, and it was a friend telling me that another friend from high school. Again, I was at this point, essentially, it was been about 1 year since I graduated high school, had been killed in Iraq. He was a soldier. He was essentially drove transports, and it was a roadside bomb that killed him. And what had happened was he became aware that he saw the roadside bomb apparently, and moved to shield the person who was in the vehicle with him from being killed by it. So he was struck in the back with all the shrapnel that killed him. And I remember how much that hit. I mean, that was the first time in my life that someone that close that I knew at that age had passed, had died. And it's hard to say. I mean, even especially with Elvis telling the story about how essentially Matiss got in the way, a lot of those thoughts came back. A lot of those feelings about just a young man who was a good guy who wanted to, with his last moment, save somebody. It's hard. And I'll something else I want to throw out there, and I understand this may happen to some people. Maybe it doesn't happen to others. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. It feels like I have to explain this, but sometimes when these kinds of things happen in life, and it's someone like this, it's a goalie on a hockey team. I mean, probably most Jackets fans, the closest they ever got to him was maybe getting like an autograph or something. I mean, there were people who knew him very well, and that hurts. But to a lot of us, he was a goalie on a hockey team. But there's a reality when you're a fan. You watch these guys, and their professional successes and their professional failures are things that you celebrate with them, and that you're sad with them when things go wrong. And I mean, it's something where it's this different kind of relationship you have where, they don't know who you are, but that doesn't mean you can't care about them. That doesn't mean you don't have, real legitimate emotions with them as far as their lives and wanting the best for them and wanting them to be happy and then being legitimately heartbroken when something happens. I mean, I think a lot of us are legitimately heartbroken when things happen and people are hurt in this world, and that's where we are with this, and it's awful. I know the Blue Jackets have announced, they're doing the charity. They're putting a foundation in his name. Count me amongst those who say that they should be hanging 80 from the rafters at Nationwide Arena at this point, because, I mean, a player a guy who would do what he did in that moment. I mean, that's a minor thing you can do to honor him, so that he's always remembered and he's someone who's always talked about. So that's my take on that. I'm going to do a quick word from our friends at the Hockey Podcast Network. And yeah, this is going to be a bit of a hard turn on this, but we'll be back and we'll talk about the expansion draft.
Hey, hockey fans, I'm Breezy.
And I'm Ray Ray. We host the House of Hockey podcast on the Hockey Podcast Network.
We're lifelong hockey fans who talk about the game and the lifestyle. Our guests include professional hockey players.
My rookie party had to wear Speedo, and then we had a checklist of stuff we had to do.
Here we go, Gaber. What do you got to say? And it's kind of like, you know better than that now, boys.
I got dressed for the Bruins. Get a phone call. He's like, dude, we need you over here by the elevator. You got to get downstairs. You got to get dressed right now.
Started playing the like, dun, 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 and I turned it around and it had the Olympic rings and said, we did it.
NHL team hockey reporters.
I actually took the Stanley Cup to this ice bar where they've got now girls around them, and I've got a fur coat on.
I wonder who he shoot checked over here. And then I looked down at my feet.
Hockey fans.
The entire bar was lined with guys in Kings jerseys. We quickly realized, oh my gosh, this is the dad's trip.
And we bring unique hockey stories to light.
Coming back to England, 24 rings in the entire country. That's where the problem starts with the sport of ice hockey here.
Canadian Blind Hockey Association, those few kids we interviewed, their whole week is built around Sunday at the rink. They're just hockey players.
We don't agree on everything.
Pineapple goes on pizza.
No, it does not.
I think it does. But we do agree that there are many people and places that build the House of Hockey.
New episodes every Tuesday. Come on in to the House of Hockey podcast on the Hockey Podcast Network.
All right, guys, and we are back. So the expansion draft is Wednesday. It's going to be kind of crazy. The big thing today is, so the official list came out, and the notable players not protected is crazy. First of all, we're going to talk about the Blue Jackets. Now, the Blue Jackets, the main player they left off their list is Max Domi, which is huge. I mean, this is the guy we traded Josh Anderson for, signed a 2-year deal, but what I think is, and this is what Blue Jackets fans should be preparing themselves for, this is another sign that we are hitting the reset button. And I've seen people talk about how this is a misstep of the trade. This shows how badly they bungled this and everything. I think there's a couple things here. First of all, people compare it to Josh Anderson, which obviously you do. The two players are traded for each other, and Josh Anderson, scored goals in the Stanley Cup final this year. I want to see, the Josh Anderson deal, 7 years, I want to see how well that matures. I hope the guy does great, in which case we would be losing this trade. That's not even debatable at that point if he has a great career with Montreal. But to look at these trades and just be like, oh, well, this immediately shows how awful that trade was then. If you evaluate it for what we knew at the time, at the time, the Blue Jackets had Pierre-Luc Dubois and thought they had Pierre-Luc Dubois as their number one center. There was still this mindset that we were going to be able to try and re-sign Seth Jones. Now here we stand, little less than a year since that trade, and Pierre-Luc Dubois was gone. We know Seth Jones has got 1 foot out the door. So yeah, it's reset time. Those two moves changed the franchise. If tomorrow, the Colorado Avalanche, if Nathan MacKinnon goes, if their number one center, Nathan MacKinnon goes, I'm out. I don't want to be here. And then Cale Makar, their top defenseman, goes, yeah, me too. I don't want to be here. And they both find ways to get themselves out of town in a year. Then other moves they make may not make sense, and that's just it. That forces you to change what you want to do. Now, we can have the debate about whether the Blue Jackets are at fault for those two players wanting out. And, as much as we've seen things, there's got to be something underneath that's caused this. I don't know what it would be, but there's got to be something that's caused it. And some people may say it's, Torts, but even after Torts leaves, if somebody wants out, it's tough to say exactly what the problem is there. But so now it's like looking at, maybe Domi goes. Now, if Domi goes, all of a sudden the Blue Jackets go into next season because right now they have got $23 million in cap space. That number goes up to 28-29 if Domi is taken by Seattle. And the Blue Jackets then have all the cap space in the world to make moves, whether that's just building more assets or whatever it's going to be. The other interesting ones, and Sportsnet did an interesting little article where they show the list and then they kind of show the notable exceptions on every team. First of all, we've got to talk about the Canadiens. It's almost as if the Canadiens put enough players out there to dare Seattle to pick one that it's going to mess them a little bit. The Canadiens exposed Carey Price, Jonathan Drouin, and Shea Weber. Now, with Carey Price, now pretty much the day it was announced he was going to be on the list. There's also all these stories about how he may need surgery and he might miss most of next season and all sorts of stuff. Granted, the Blue Jackets are playing the same game with Max Domi because they've said he's probably missing at the earliest early December, and it may go even further than that. But I think there's some teams that have decided we're not going to try and trade our way out of this, but we are going to try and essentially just give them options so that they, maybe try and get them into picking the one we really want in there. Now, Carey Price has got 5 more years at $10.5 million. This could be a move by the Canadiens to try and, move him on, get rid of that cap hit. They may legitimately have looked at their team after the last. Of course, I'm not sure how they would have done it because after this last playoffs, if they didn't have Carey Price, they wouldn't have gone where they did. But they may look at their team and say, "Hey, if we can free up that $10.5 million, we think maybe Jake Allen can get us, 80% of what Carey Price did, and then we can use that money other areas of the team to build up more." As far as other interesting players that have been kind of left exposed here, the big ones are probably you got Mark Giordano in Calgary. Taylor Hall by Boston. But then again, some of these are kind of throw you off because if somebody's a free agent, the Kraken can draft them. But if the Kraken can't sign them, then that guy can go sign wherever he wants. Jeff Skinner by Buffalo, but you're probably not going to go after him. Nino Niederreiter by the Carolina Hurricanes. The Avalanche exposing Gabriel Landeskog. That's something. That's kind of an interesting one. The reality is there's enough players. The Predators both Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson. Now, that may be another calculated move. First of all, we know that Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson haven't lived up to the contracts that the Predators thought they were signing them to. But this may be a situation where the Predators were looking at their list and saying, who are we going to protect? Who are we going to protect? Realized, even if they wanted to save both Duchene and Ryan Johansson, when they looked at their other players, they said, well, we won't be able to save them both. So instead of making the decision, they left both exposed. But I think Nashville probably wants out of both contracts at this point. PK Subban's been exposed in New Jersey. PK Subban, honestly, if you're the Kraken, depending on what you think you're going to do this year, he might be a good player to sign because he's great with people in the media, and he'd just be a great kind of introductory player to bring in. Who else might they be going after? Oh, the Blues with Vladimir Tarasenko. That could be a big one. And Tampa Bay exposing Andre Palat. Wow. That is a big one in my mind. Again, there is especially after what we saw last time, if the Kraken look at this expansion draft and say, we're going after the best player at each position, we're just going to get the best player from each team. I mean, they're a team that could be a middle of the ground, a middle of the standings. They could have a shot at that 4th seed in the expansion draft. They definitely could. Something I could see happening. So we'll see what happens. The expansion draft is Monday. Or the expansion draft is Wednesday. Excuse me, folks. I believe the NHL draft is just this next weekend. So, I mean, we've got a lot happening really quickly. As far as the NHL offseason goes. Now, I've thrown around the idea in my head of doing some big expansion draft thing or some big draft preview, but I'm going to be honest, guys, I don't know enough about these draft picks. There's a dozen different resources online. Go find cool places that know about these guys, read up on them. The one thing I've been seeing is it doesn't look like the Blue Jackets are going to expand and add any more picks. They've got 3 first-round picks, so we'll see what they do. Now, maybe it's possible they take those 2 later picks in the first round and move up for an earlier pick. I don't know. I mean, after last year and the draft of Chinikov there, I think it's pretty obvious that the Blue Jackets are just going to pick who they think they want to get. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for coming back aboard. We'll be going back to weekly shows here for a bit. And then so I'll talk to you next Sunday when we have our draft recap, talk about the expansion draft, everything that happened there. So thank you all very much for listening, watching, however you get into this, and go Jackets.
Please subscribe to the show, follow us on Twitter @JacketsDebrief, and thank you for listening.